Welcome back to Property Play. I'm your host, Elena Serraditas. This channel discusses all things real estate and the Canadian real estate market. Today, I have a fantastic co-host with me. I have Elon from Mortgage Outlet. He is the co-founder and, what am I calling you? President, CEO, mortgage broker specialist, whatever. All the titles. Elon is one of the best mortgage brokers, I would say, that I know in the business.
Thank you.
It's politically correct that I know in the business. Yep. He is going to discuss all things appraisers today.
Oh,
yeah. So why do we need appraisers? What is an appraisal? Like, talk us through it.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to talk about with appraisals. I like to simplify appraisals with two main functions. The first thing is, what's the property value, like based on a fair and reasonable assessment? So if you think back to the craziness of COVID and bidding wars, when someone was bidding 200, 300,000, 400,000 over the asking price, appraisers knew this, banks knew this, realtors knew this, but there also is some element of reality. So if the house across the street sold for 1.4 a week ago and you pay 1,460, they know that that makes sense and that the market is going up. But if the house sold a week ago for 1.4 and you paid 1.8 and it's a similar house, that's where an appraiser is going to come in and say, I don't think the market has gone up $400,000 in 5 days. So the first thing is value. Is there a fair value? The second thing is, and not many people talk about this, it's just the condition of the property. And I use the word livability and safety. So is there mold? Is there bad wiring? Is the basement flooding? Is the whole house about to fall in? Well, the lender, the bank, is using that property as collateral. And if the house is dangerous, electric, flooding, molds, knob and tube wiring, UFI, all these sort of property deficiencies, at a certain point, the property's not safe. So it could be a beautiful house in a beautiful location, but the lender could be like, property not livable, like decline, we're not doing this mortgage. So those are the two main things.
The moment you said the whole not livable situation, you know what story came to my mind?
Ugh.
Should we talk about it? I feel like we should talk about it.
I mean, that's huge.
Okay, so once upon a time.
This is a legendary story, by the way. Only Elena could actually deliver on this. But,
so I call Elon before I ever submit an offer, by the way.
Which is a good habit for realtors.
This is what everyone should be doing. Yeah. Golden standard of, if you are a consumer and you're buying a property and you want to make sure that you're good, send it to the mortgage broker first, make sure you get a green light, and then put in the offer. And if they say put in a finance condition, or if they do something, then, follow as advised. So we go see this property and I call Elon and I'm like, it's livable. And he's like, are you sure? And I'm like, it's livable. I'm telling you, I saw it. It's cosmetic. I can change it. We can fix it. It will be
You can hear the crackling
great.
in the voice. It's livable. I'm like, would you live there? Well,
I would if we paint we change the floors and we maybe take the popcorn ceiling off and we put a new kitchen and we make it beautiful. I would totally live here. But I literally could see it, how easy the change could be. My client wasn't afraid of a reno. Her brother was a contractor and was like, this is easy. We could totally flip this around. This is going to be amazing. So we're all on board. This is an off-market property, so there's no photos on MLS. There's nothing that, Elon could even look at and be like, okay, like this, I can show it the way it is. It was a time during COVID, so they weren't really doing in-person inspections, but they had nothing to go on this property, so they had to send someone. So the guy comes in, and I'm present for this appraisal. And we're going to talk about that after.
Yes.
I am present for the appraisal. And I'm telling this guy, this is totally livable. I'm like, take the photos better. Because he's like pointing at all the problems. I'm like, buddy, you want a coffee? I'll get you a coffee. Like, how can I help you? Help me. I'm like, don't take the photo that way. Take it a little lower. Turn it to the side. Like, do it to a way that we could get this funded and we're not going to have a problem. The guy comes in. He's like, yeah, no problem. I'll help you out. I'll help you out. I get a phone call from Elon basically being like, you did not tell me the house looked like that.
This is like the worst property I've ever seen, pretty much.
And I was like, it's not that bad. And he goes, let me send you the photos. I've never seen worse photos taken in my life. He took the worst photos at the worst angles. There was parts of the floor that they ripped out the carpet, so you would just see the subflooring in. There was a hole in the roof. He took a photo of the hole in the roof.
Yeah, that's their job. That's their job.
Yeah, but I was trying to be nice. I offered him coffee. Like, come on.
Still his job.
Yeah, so he took photos of all of this stuff. The kitchen was missing appliances, but that's easy. Like, everything that we saw is patch it.
Appliances is actually not an issue.
Yeah, but everything that we were looking at was literally patch it, paint it, change it. I could sell it. Easy, cosmetic is all I said to Elon.
That's not how I remember it, but okay.
Then
I remember like OMG, but
yeah, he's like, there's no way we can fix this. And I'm like, I'm going to figure out a solution. So like quick on my feet, I'm like, I'm going to call the other agent and tell him that we're going to renovate the property. By the way, like this does not happen. Like in the history of ever, does the listing agent say, sure, go in and renovate the property before you get the keys at your own expense. And like, we're okay with whatever work you do. So I basically told the agent, give me 2 more weeks or give me a week or something like that. It was either a week or 2 weeks.
It was 3 weeks. Yeah,
I think it was 2 weeks.
Yeah.
It
was an insane.
It was 14 days.
It was very fast.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way this is happening.
And I told everyone it's cosmetic. No one ever believes me. The same appraiser, by the way, showed up again. So I go back to the house. I talk to the brother. I talk to the sister. I'm like, this is what's going to happen. Like, we need to fix this house. Can you guys do this in this amount of time? And if you do, we can still get the house. He's like, yeah, no problem. Not only did we fully MTV made up my crib house.
That's true. That's true.
It was night and day.
You pimped his ride.
It was night and day.
Yeah.
We also, like, they did more than I told them to do. We just needed to make it livable to get the appraisal done. And we got it for a great deal. These guys were like, we're here already. Shave the popcorn off the ceiling. We're here already. We should just change out the light fixtures, the doorknob handles. Let's just do a whole brand new kitchen. They changed everything in 7 days.
It was insane.
In 7 days. And part of the contract was, we're going to do all this work. It's conditional for this period. If for some reason our financing doesn't pull through, all the work remains in the house.
But again, all the lawyers were on board. Also, the buyer, the seller, the realtors, like it wasn't just like, let's just renovate. Like the lawyers, we work with a great lawyer. So that's really important as well.
And the agent on the other side also needs to be cooperative. The agent on the other side could also explain it properly to their client. Like this is this was like dealing with a bomb in the middle of the airport with like full of people. Like it's not something that just happens without a hitch. Like something's going to happen. There's going to be a lockdown. Like something's going to happen. So the appraiser comes back in, same guy, and he goes, how did you do this? How is this house done?
I think I said the same thing.
Me with my hands like this, and I'm like, I told you it was cosmetic. I was so pissed during that second visit. It comes back, auto appraised, everything's perfect.
What was that TV show when like literally they would get like 80 people to renovate a house?
It was like Love It or List It.
Yeah. No, there was another one where they would just like completely gut a house in like a week. And
that should have been on TV. That whole thing. I was literally checking in on them every week, like every day to see the progress.
Oh, are you kidding? Like,
I was okay, are the floors done? Where do we need to order? Only get stuff in stock. But they were like, yeah, but we also want her to like the stuff. So we're like, they were fully renovating it for her, but also renovating it to get this financing thing in order.
Yeah.
So yeah, appraisers could really be the make or like break of a lot of situations.
Yeah.
But that's probably the wildest.
And, I'm going to tell you, we do a lot of private lending in Mortgage Outlet. And I want to highlight the difference between a realtor and an appraiser because there's a massive difference. And I think the context really matters. So actually, let me take a step back. So when you buy a house and there's 2 realtors, in general, the appraiser's job in terms of the value and the price is just to make sure that someone wasn't overly stupid. It's not a high bar. It's like you've got a realtor here, you've got a separate realtor there, there's different parties, there's professional agents. Like they paid $1 million. Yeah, it's probably worth around $1 million. 970, $1 million, like it's good enough, write it up at $1 million, we're good. Now, if the appraiser was like, you paid $1 million, we're going to put 980. You paid $1 million, we're going to put 992. What would happen is that breaks the whole machine down. And what I mean by that is the banks get screwed, the mortgage broker gets screwed, the realtors get screwed, the buyer gets screwed, the seller gets screwed over $8,000. So on a purchase on MLS with 2 professional realtors, the appraiser's really just like, yeah, makes sense. Like we're good, write it up. But I want to contrast that with a refinance or even if there's only one realtor. But let's use a refinance. So the homeowner's like, my house is worth $2.8 million, right? There's no independence. There's no different parties. There's no professional representative buyer and seller. Appraisers are harder on refinances than purchases. Actually, I'm going to say a cognitive bias, which is funny. But when we do an appraiser, we're like, hi, appraiser, they paid $1 million for this property. Go appraise it. Well, you're biasing them. You just gave them a piece of paper that said it's worth $1 million. And again, in the context of a purchase, they're really trying to get you that value. A lot of realtors are really scared of the appraisal. So the first thing is purchase, refinance, and again, 2 realtors versus like my house is worth so much money. The second lens with private lending, and this is very important. So what is an appraiser? Again, I'm going to oversimplify. An appraiser is some dude sitting in his basement in Ajax with a laptop. He comes in, he spends 5 minutes in the house, snapping a few pics. Okay, good. Oh, I didn't realize that this is this school district and that's that school district. And this house backs onto this ravine and that house backs onto the gas station. They're just like, 30 minutes, factory, write it up. So when I lend my own money, when Mortgage Outlet lends our own money, we go to a realtor and we ask the realtor because, and again, I'm going to be very specific here, a seasoned, knowledgeable, experienced realtor, not someone who got their license 18 months ago that's kind of done one deal. I want a seasoned realtor. Hey, I have this condo. How much is it worth? They're not going to tell you what it's worth. What building is it in? What floor is it on? What's the square footage? Does it have a parking? Is it the south view or the north view? And a realtor will literally diagnose what side of the street, what school district, so that they say, Elon, this house is worth 1.2 million. By the way, I had a listing 2 blocks away. There were 27 showings. Or maybe in this market, by the way, I had another listing 9 floors higher and it was dead. An appraiser's not going to have that feeling, right? They're looking literally by definition at historical past data. The other thing that an appraiser is going to do is they're very limited in how they look at something. So if something is a semi-detached and you bought an N unit townhouse, an appraiser is going to be like, that's semi-detached, like I can't look at it. A realtor is going to be like, it's technically not the same thing, but an N unit wide townhouse is at least in the same category from a buyer's perspective as a semi, and they will look at it. So if I'm looking for like an accurate, actual assessment, I'm going to a knowledgeable, experienced realtor all day long. When if it's for like bank lending and you've got good credit and good income and like sure, appraiser, like go for it.
And the 5-day conditional period, because most contracts will have a conditional period of some sort. During those days is also when the appraiser comes out. If you're lucky. Oh, you're giving me a look.
Well, so it's funny, but one of the things when I bought my first house many, many years ago, I remember getting a call. I was the buyer. I wasn't a mortgage broker at the time, but I was the buyer. And they're like, okay, Elon, like they're going to schedule the appraisal. And I'm like, there's 5 days to closing. Like, what do you mean they're going to do the appraisal? Like, what if they can't get in? They lost the key. Like, there's a problem. Like, so when I do my stuff, I really strive to get the appraisal done during the 5-day period, because frankly, if there's an issue, I want to know about it when it's conditional. Oh, the appraiser said there's, insul brick, or there's, fuses and not enough amperage, or there's an oil tank and environmental concerns. I want to know about that while the purchase is conditional, not after it's firm and you've got no ways out. So I like to do my appraisers during the conditional period. That protects the buyer in the biggest way possible.
And then what happens, and like we know the answer to this, but our listeners might not. What happens if the property doesn't appraise?
So when people say it doesn't appraise, generally that means that, you paid $1 million and it came back at 950. So there's a few things. Number one, I mean, there's always sort of 3 options, right? You can just, as the buyer, you can just accept the condition and just put an extra 50 grand more down. You can walk away and be like, oh, I changed my mind, like the appraisal did. Or you can just renegotiate with the seller and say like, hey, property came in at 950, like, what are we doing here? And then you go to your realtors and kind of figure it out. But again, three options.
If you're in the conditional period.
Correct.
What happens if, you really love the property, you're competing in multiple offers, We take out the finance condition. We're firm on the deal. What happens if the appraisal doesn't come through?
So, I mean, there's a lot of different things we can do. Like the first thing is simply like, oh, can you just increase your down payment? Oh, you own another property, you can refinance it, increase the down payment. You can still try to renegotiate with a seller, but like realistically, they might not be willing to renegotiate. Maybe if it's a rural property and you're like, I'm not going to close unless you do it, there might be like so it could escalate to a lawyer thing. It could be another lender will use a different appraiser in a different context or an automated appraiser. So there's different solutions that are available to the buyer. But again, way better to have this conversation in the conditional period than after the purchase is
You
firm.
said something about an auto appraisal.
Yeah.
Let's go backwards because most people aren't going to know what that is. So what is an auto appraisal? How do you get that?
So an auto appraisal is basically, I mean, it's a statistical appraisal where the lender keys in the address, the price, this and that, and they run it through a statistical model and they're like, yeah, it kind of makes sense. And they're like, good. And different lenders have different policies of when you can and cannot use an auto appraisal. Like, I'm going to oversimplify, brand new properties, generally, they don't like auto appraisals because if it's brand new, was the sink installed, was the drywall installed, they want someone in for a brand new property. Rental properties, they tend to want auto appraisals. Again, there's exceptions to every rule. Luxury properties, 2, 3, 4 million plus. Again, like they want someone going into this $4, $6, $8 million property, make sure, there's everything is as it should be. So it really depends on
the scenario. Is it more likelihood that there's an auto appraisal if it's a high ratio mortgage? So like if someone's putting less than 20% down, is there a higher likelihood that no one shows up and it just auto appraises?
Yeah, so absolutely so I would suspect that 80, 90% or more of high ratio mortgages, meaning you put less than 20% down, you're getting an insurer to insure the lender auto appraise. A lot of times they actually send an appraiser in without telling anyone. They're not doing it in a secret way, but just for like speed, they'll call the listing agent. They're like, hey, we're doing it. Or they might do, there's also an appraisal called a drive-by appraisal. And they might just literally drive by, house looks clean, take a look, the grass is cut, house looks in good condition, like we're okay. So on insured mortgages, again, an extremely high percentage auto appraise. But if they don't, they send in like, I don't book it, like it's all done on the back end and it's just like, yeah, it worked out. We're good.
Okay. And like the worst of the worst case scenario, like, appraisal doesn't come through. It's a firm deal.
Yeah.
Usually what I tell people is there's 3 options.
Yeah.
We send a second appraisal in if you're working with a mortgage broker because they'll try with another lender.
Yeah.
It still doesn't work. I send an appraisal rebuttal and it's basically like a nice little document that says, this is why we believe the property is worth what we offered.
Yes.
These are the comps you should be using for this property. This is why it's worth what it's worth. And I've it's happened. It's luck of the draw. The more transactions you do, the more likelihood it will happen it will happen. And then that usually will be like the saving grace. And if the worst case scenario happens, then you come up with the difference in price.
Yeah,
and
there's a whole, like it's all about mitigation, like making things easy. And eventually if there's like everyone is a no, then you go to mom and dad or you refinance or you do whatever you need to do. But I want to go back though. And this is to me, I don't know. I just look at things the way I look at things, but in a declining market, and the market can turn quickly. But actually, I'm going to use an example because I remember this. So April 2017-ish, the government announced the non-resident sales tax and real estate prices just plummeted pretty much overnight. And properties that were selling, I remember in Vaughan at let's say 1.4 were like 1.2, 1.1 a million within 3 to 8 weeks. So what I do as a mortgage broker, especially in the conditional period, there actually was no conditions at that time because every house had like 18 offers. So it was a firm offer, get the appraisal right away, house appraises, we're good, files complete. But what other people did was they didn't order the appraisal right away. And the closing is in 4 months, don't worry. And all of a sudden, a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months goes by, a couple of comparables start coming out. And that house on the same street sold 3 months later for 1.1 and you paid 1.4. And that appraiser, again, it's very simple. The appraiser needs to lean into recent appraisals. If something was a week ago and something was 3 months ago, they're heavily going to weight the week ago. So if you wait 3 months in a declining market or in a market where things change, right? You could have a problem that you could have avoided if you would have gotten an appraisal, 3-4 months earlier. Now, a lot of people are worried. I hear these rumors, like, again, knock on wood, the bank ordered a second appraiser, this, that is extremely rare. Once the appraisal's done inside of 90 days, inside of 120 days, and it's signed off, it's generally fine. Now, I'll tell you the opposite is true, where I had a client that wanted to refinance a property, again, during the insanity of COVID, and their property appraised for $1 million and it wasn't enough money. We waited 3 months. A couple other houses sold on the street for 1.1, 1.2, 1.3. We reappraised it and we got 1.3 because then it was a skyrocketing market. So we actually were very deliberate.
You did one of my refinances during that time.
I mean,
do you remember that?
I don't. I
called Elon and I was like, we just bought the house. We were like less than 6 months and we were under.
I remember this. Yeah.
We were still kind of under renovation, but don't tell the bank. It's fine. Watch them all watch this now.
We tell the bank.
We tell the bank. We tell the bank everything. But I'm sitting there and I'm like, Elon, a house sold on my street. You need to refinance my property like right now. And he goes, you bought your property 6 months. Like it was less than 6 months. I was like 4 months.
Yeah.
He's like, you bought it 4 months ago. And I'm like, I know, but I need it refinanced like today. He goes, why? And I'm like, a house just sold on my street for it was like 2.4 million.
Yeah, I remember.
And I'm like, I bought for 1.6. And I'm like, it's also a semi. I'm like, you need to go get this refinanced. And he's like, you literally just closed. And I'm like, yep, open it back up. Like, go renegotiate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we pulled out a bunch of money because that was the prime time of within 6 months.
There's an element again, if it's a refinance or again, but I like to get my appraisals done and then not worry about it. I think that again, even now we have a new calendar year, the market changes unexpectedly, right? We had COVID-19, the market plummeted, then it skyrocketed. Just get it done and then move on. The other related issue, you said quite a few things there, but new construction. People bought new construction, especially downtown condos, in the height of COVID at 14, 16, 1,800 a square foot. And now that condo's ready today in 2025, and it's appraising at 1,000 a square foot. Well, believe it or not, even on new construction, there are mechanisms to appraise the property based on the piece of paper. So those people could have gotten an appraisal the day they signed it in 2021 or whatever at the peak. And now they're like, I paid, $800,000 for 500 square feet and it just appraised at 500,000. Again, if that appraiser and that file would have been handled differently, it wouldn't have been sort of an issue of breach of contract, because now that person needs to come up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference.
So we talked about a topic before the camera started rolling. We didn't get into it because I was like,
this is a good topic.
Yeah, because I was like, we'll wait for the cameras to start rolling and then we'll talk about it. Should a real estate agent, a seller, someone be present during the appraisal? Yeah,
so I think absolutely not. And actually, I'll take a step back, but appraisers are human. So make your bed, wash your dishes, clean up a little bit. It matters. They're a human being. There is going to be subconscious energy karma. I'm not a hokey guy, but the beds are made, it's clean, everything is nice and straight. That's going to impact how they view the house and how they remember the house. Now, in terms of, what was the question again about?
Should someone be present or not?
So nobody likes it when you tell them how to do their job. So if you're one of those realtors that's following and lurking, or sellers lurking around with the appraiser, I think they're going to get annoyed. I think they'll tense up, and I don't think it will be helpful. I think that you could point out one or two features and just be like, oh, just so you know, there's heated floors in the concrete and just so you kind of make your peace and move on. But I don't think I think from an energy perspective and it just tenses you up. It's I know how to do my job. I want to get in and out of here. There's rush hour, leave me alone.
I'm the complete opposite. I'm if you can be there, try and be there. Not the seller or the buyer, but the agent. And I say that because you know the difference between they spent $20,000 in this kitchen, or they spent $80,000 because that's upgraded marble, or that's upgraded tiling, or that's like whatever. And the other house down the street might have not had that. And like, did you also see this? And like, we have this. There are certain things that that you wouldn't know. Like you mentioned it. He's in the basement typing up his numbers and he's seeing what comes out of it. If I can have a little bit more control over it, that would be ideal.
Yeah, I think it's very, but you have to be very subtle.
Strategic.
You can't just be like,
no, you got to be like.
So on a related note, here's a actually very related question, but every so often, and again, let's be clear, 98%, 99+% of the time, the appraisal is not an issue. Like, it gets done, 2 professional realtors, everything is fine. Again, refinances and some other issues, new construction is notwithstanding, but there's an issue with the value. So I go to the realtor and I'm like, there's an issue with the value. Like, how did you come up with this? And then the realtor sends me an encyclopedia that's 8,000 pages with 400 comparables. And I'm like, no, I'm not even looking at this. Give me one comparable and give me like 3 or 4 reasons why your house is superior to that. But if you give 14 reasons, it's kind of like, oh, and there's a pool and this and that. And it's just, you lose credibility. So 1, maybe 2 comparables. This house sold 18 months ago, too old. This house is a townhouse, not a semi. This house is not this. Like, just give me the relevant comparables. I usually will
only show up if there's a need for me to be there.
100%.
Like, for example, like we know, like we're trying to get a little bit more money out of them. Like, we're doing a refinance, we're doing a whatever. And like, my clients asked me to go in so we can try and, fluff it up a bit.
Yeah.
Or for example, like we're in a multiple offer situation, things got intense, things got aggressive. We're close enough to make it in the realm of possibilities, but let me make sure that, if there's something I could have done, let's make sure it's done. And I've had situations where like I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I got home and was like, this property didn't appraise, and I could have been there and told them exactly why. It's the reason why it is. But it's being nice. And it's also like, you approach it a little differently. Like the appraiser is going to call you and say, hey, I'm coming to see the property on Tuesday at 4:00. And you're like, sounds great. Would you like coffee? Like, I'll bring coffee. Listen, and then I bring coffee. And then we chat about it.
Or just bring it.
And sometimes I can't make it. So I'll call them and be like, listen, like, I can't make it to the property, but is there anything you want to know? Or is there anything that can make your life easier? And they'll be like, sure. I'm like, I have a list of all the upgrades for the house. You want to afford it? Like, I'll make it very, very easy for them. So it's like, you don't have to look at what type the floor is, what is this, what is that. You just verify the list. Here's a list of, this is the kitchen, this is the washroom, this is everything that's in it. And it helps.
I mean, generally, again, in the context of a purchase, we generally don't even need that.
So I had a client once, and this is like, they've exited Canada. They were doing, they were changing the property from personal to corporation so they can leave the country. And when they did that, they had a very, very unique property. And and it's so unique that there is not an appraiser, I believe in, that could figure this out.
No, I get it.
And when we bought it off market. And we bought it based on like, there's nothing like this. It's a one-of-a-kind property.
Right.
So of course the price is going to be different. I did a whole analysis for them, for their lawyers. So I wrote a whole entire, like, kind of like an appraisal rebuttal, but not. I wrote an opinion of value, which is different than an appraisal.
Opinion of value, 100%.
Exactly. So I did a whole opinion of value. It was like 6 pages long of exactly why. Like, written up, here's the math, here's the comps, here's the math that I did on the comps. These are the adjustments I did on it. I wrote everything. When the appraiser calls me, he's like, that place is awesome. And I'm like, yeah, they made me do an opinion of value. Like, it's a very tough property to comp. And he goes, do you mind sending it to me? Like, no problem. I forwarded him over my opinion of value.
I mean,
ask me how. This auto appraises. Everything is perfect. Done. And my client calls me and he goes, Elena, you think we can get that much? Like, let's sell it today. And I was like, we're not selling it. We're not selling it today. Not
and
selling
again,
it.
actually, but again, unique property.
Unique.
But hang on, you get 4 realtors, you get 4 appraisers, you're going to get 8 numbers.
Exactly.
Like, the more, again, 800 square foot condo, you're going to get a really tight
But most
level,
appraisers also say a range. Like, it's between this and this. They're never going to tell you a hard stop number. So when I give an opinion of value, I give a range. I'm like, at the low end, it's worth this. At the high end, it's worth this. Like, I had in the history of me doing this, I've had one property not appraised.
Mm-hmm.
And it was for my fiance. Yeah. Before he was my fiance. It was the first ever property he ever bought. He bought it with a friend of his.
Yeah.
At 55 Stewart.
Okay.
Okay. So we buy the property and I'm on cloud nine. I'm like, we just stole this property. Like we got the best deal in this building. At that time, it was a great deal. It was $480 for a junior 1-bedroom, which by the way, don't compare it to today's prices because in today's prices, a good deal would have been $380 for the same type of inventory. So $480 at that time, everything in that building and the building across the street was selling for $600,000 for that kind of same inventory. $550, $560, $610, like that's kind of where the range was. So I'm jumping up and down. We just stole this property. This is fantastic. Appraiser comes back. Appraiser says, light, the property is actually worth, and it was like $420. Like, where did they come up with this value? It made absolutely zero sense. They used the one outlier comp. The one outlier of a unit that was misrepresented and missold in the same building.
Yeah, but they don't have.
But they don't know.
No, but it's not. They don't have the freedom to make the assessment. It's a comparable. Like
You're
if
right.
the seller was desperate and dying and moving out of the country, they don't care.
They also don't know what agents know. Like
Correct.
they don't know what actually
Correct.
happened in that situation.
No, and they don't need to.
So they don't know that this property got listed and sold within 4 hours. They don't know that it got listed and sold within 4 hours without it being seen because it wasn't reported until the 14th day. But if you called, which I did call, it was sold within 4 hours. And I have the agent on social media and she posted it was sold within 4 hours. This recent comp.
But that if you would have let the appraiser know that and they could have validated it, they could have excluded that appraisal.
But I wrote the appraisal rebuttal and it got excluded. Okay, so don't worry. There's that silver lining. Don't worry. I'm not going in blindly ever. I'm running the comps for my clients. Like I'm looking at it. I'm never going to try and put someone into that position.
Yeah.
So less than 4 hours, sold the property. All is good in the world. They marketed it as a studio instead of a junior 1-bedroom. Mm-hmm. So they also like knocked us down based on that. And they were a penthouse unit.
Right.
So that one should have never sold for what it sold for. That guy got a deal and a half. And even in this market, if he goes to sell it, he still made money. Got a deal and a half. I had to write an appraisal rebuttal because that one comp that was in the building, that was an outlier comp, affected my sale.
Yeah, but I mean, appraisal rebuttal sounds very fancy. Like to me, it's like 4 bullet points. It's like on the market for 4 hours, desperate seller.
I was like oh my God, like Dan just bought this property. Like I'm screwed. Like how did this not appraise? Like there's no way it couldn't appraise. So I wrote a nice little letter basically being like, this is the reason why the property is worth the value that I offered. And I'm actually like, we got a deal. And I wrote that all in the offer. I was like, here are the comps. Here are, and I used, I think 2 comps in the building and 1 comp outside the building because I was told from an appraiser once upon a time that that's what they use. 2 comps in the same building, 1 comp outside the building. So they show the area value.
Depends on the bank.
Yeah, depends on the bank. But I was told once upon a time that that's what they're looking at.
Right.
Like, sounds great. So I took all the comps other than that comp in the building. And I went across the street at, I think, 38 Stewart or something like that. And took one from there too. And was like, here you go. In the realm of possibilities, they should have never sold below like 550. And we got it for 480.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, okay, perfect, done. Like,
yeah, but you introduced, but you also introduced new information that maybe they didn't have access to.
They didn't. And
so you did your job.
I did my job, but I did call the agent and asked her. I was like, can you write me a letter just saying that they were under just like distress or whatever, just saying like, hey, listen, like it sold that quickly for that price because X, Y, Z.
I think 4 hours is like, that's pretty black and white that I don't know an appraiser that.
But you know what this agent told me?
What?
They were like, I'm not doing that because I don't want to say that I did anything wrong and I don't believe I did anything 100%.
wrong.
100%. And
I get
I'm not showing it to anyone other than my bank. Like,
no, but it doesn't matter. Like you got to be careful. Yes.
But still, like it's black and white.
Yeah.
That shouldn't have been the sale.
Yeah. But again, like, and that's the thing. There's more and more like you know, things might not go straight. It might be like this. And then you got it done and you moved on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think that wraps up episode. And I'm not even sure what number we're on, but appraisals and what to do when your appraiser does not come through. If it doesn't come through, it's Alana Saraditas. And this was Elon from Mortgage Outlet. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, like to know more information about real estate, make sure to like, follow, and subscribe.